Nora Wilson pulled on a gray wool coat that sat awkwardly on her shoulders and exhaled, eyes fixed on the sign above the entrance, Midwest Private Medical Archives. She still couldn't believe she'd applied for this job. Archives, paperwork, silence, and fluorescent lights. It felt more like a freeze frame than a life. But that was the point. After a year of chaos, she needed exactly this, to feel nothing at all. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and old furniture. To the left, a reception desk. Behind it, a girl in her 20s, glasses and a braid wrapped around her neck like a scarf. She looked up from her screen. "Miss Wilson?" she asked, before Nora could speak. "Yes. The director is expecting you. Fourth floor, office 412. Elevator straight ahead." Nora nodded and walked. Her heels sounded too loud. Like gunshots in the corridor, she slowed down instinctively. No one here was in a rush. The place felt frozen in time. Walls painted green, nameplates slightly crooked, and the air carried not just antiseptic and dust, but something stubbornly intangible, like time itself. Office 412 was at the far end of the corridor. The door plate read, "Adam Collins, Director." She knocked. "Come in," a voice answered instantly, soft but assured. Inside, everything was minimal. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window overlooking a dull, gray Chicago in March. The man behind the desk looked up. Close-cropped hair, angular features, a focused gaze that felt less like looking and more like studying. "Miss Wilson, have a seat." She stepped forward and cautiously sat down. He didn't offer his hand, just opened a folder. "Your resume," he began without looking at her. "You have solid experience with medical records, and you're familiar with digitization. That's important." Nora nodded. "Thank you. I worked at St. Thomas Clinic, Archives Department 2016 to 2022. "Why did you leave?" "The clinic shut down. Financial problems. Half the staff was laid off. The rest went unpaid for months. I couldn't afford to stay." He nodded, made a note. "Why our archive specifically?" The question was standard, but something in his tone felt personal. Nora straightened. "Because it's stable work. No patience, no chaos. I like order." He finally looked up. "And silence?" Sometimes." He narrowed his eyes slightly. A few seconds passed in silence. Then he closed the folder and said calmly, "You didn't list any relatives in your resume. Was that intentional?" Nora flinched. Not at the question, but at how he asked it. It didn't sound like a formality. It sounded like he knew it would touch a nerve. She gave a strained smile. "That's not really relevant to the position, is it?" "Perhaps." He leaned back in his chair. "We tend to keep a close-knit staff. People here know more about each other than they probably want to. There's no hiding." "I have no family," she said simply. "My parents are gone. No close relatives." He didn't react, just nodded. "Understood. Thank you for your honesty." Then he stood and offered his hand. "I think you'll do just fine. 1 month probation. Hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You start tomorrow. Someone will show you the locker room and get you set up in the system." She shook his hand, firm grip. Not cold, but reserved. He sat back down, mentally already out of the conversation. See you tomorrow, Miss Wilson." She stepped out, heart still pounding. Strange conversation. Not hostile, not cold, but like someone had reached inside her, just to check what was there. That evening at home, she flipped through her resume again. Sure enough, nothing about her family. In other applications, she'd usually noted, parents deceased, unmarried, no children. This time, she'd left it blank. But how had he noticed? Oddly attentive. And still not pushy. Nora stood, walked to the kitchen, brewed herself coffee, and sat by the window. March wasn't ready to let go. Snowflakes drifted lazily, as if they'd forgotten it was already spring. Her apartment was perfectly in order. Books on the shelves, plants on the sill, a neatly folded blanket on the couch. But inside her, there was no peace. "I have no family." The phrase always sounded like it needed justification, as if solitude was a flaw, not a choice. But for Nora, it had long become background noise. Her adoptive parents had passed at different times. Mother from cancer, father later from a stroke. She had grown up in a normal family. They'd loved her, as best they could. But always there was this sense, something unsaid, left unexplained. As a child, she'd once asked, "Are you sure I'm really your daughter?" Her mother had frozen for a moment, then sat down beside her. "Of course, you're ours." A strange answer. Back then it felt comforting. Now it felt evasive. Her eyes swept across the room. No childhood photos. They used to have some. But after her father died, much disappeared. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. Things had been packed up hastily, some given away, some thrown out. But now, she remembered how empty it all felt afterward. Her first day went smoothly. She got her badge, was shown around, databases, scanners, floor layout. The staff was quiet, polite, self-contained, just as promised. Everyone addressed each other by surname. No small talk. And that was comforting. A kind of coziness and detachment. Collins was rarely around. Once he passed in the hallway, nodded. Another time he stopped when she was fiddling with an old scanner. "It's a pain," he said. "We'll be replacing it soon." "I'll manage." "I don't doubt it." Then he walked away again. Sometimes she caught his gaze lingering just a moment too long. Not in a way a man looks at a woman. More like he was checking something. That evening, back home, Nora pulled out an old box from the closet. Inside, documents issued after her parents died. Certificates, letters, records. She sifted through them. No goal. Just instinct. In one envelope, her birth certificate. Yellowed, stamped. Name, Nora Wilson. Date of birth, August 14th, 1908 parents. Margaret and Daniel Wilson. An ordinary document, no footnotes, no oddities. But that night, she dreamt of opening a different box. Inside, a patient's chart. Different name. But the photo, it was her. The face, the hair, even the mole under her eye. In the dream, she looked up and saw Collins in the doorway. He said, "Are you sure that's not you?" The next day began as usual. 9 o'clock, coffee on her desk, reports on her screen. Beside her, a stack of documents waiting to be scanned. She got to work. One folder, then another, then another. When she reached the drawer marked 1970-1990, Colin's office door was slightly ajar. He was on the phone, his voice calm, short phrases. She didn't eavesdrop, just noticed that he stopped speaking when she passed. All day a strange feeling lingered, that something was beginning. Or maybe it already had. And she just hadn't noticed the moment. Everything in her life always seemed to happen silently. Like loneliness. First, it's just quiet. Then, empty. And now, someone had stepped into that quiet. And maybe, just maybe, they knew more than she did. Nora adjusted to the routine faster than she'd expected. Morning coffee from the vending machine, steady schedule. Familiar if distant faces. It gave her a strange sense of safety. The archive was quiet. Almost too quiet. Sometimes it felt like even the air here was older. It smelled of paper dust and time. By the third week, she was assigned to inventory old archive drawers. They were stored in a separate room, behind a reinforced door with a magnetic lock and restricted access. Her badge now granted her entry, temporary, subject to extension, as Mr. Lambert, a senior employee with perpetually pursed lips, had said. "Oh, be careful in there," he warned. "Some of the files haven't been digitized. Some go back to the late 60s. If you throw one out by mistake, you won't find it again. And please don't open any unmarked boxes. If there's no label, leave it. Got it?" "Got it," Nora nodded. The room was small, but packed with metal shelving. Each shelf organized alphabetically by year. She had already realized. The storage system here was almost sacred. Files were sorted, rechecked, handwritten again. People like Lambert treated the paper cards like icons. The first few days passed uneventfully. She counted boxes, compared them with the registry, marked discrepancies. Everything was on schedule. Until she came across an unmarked box. It sat in the corner on the bottom shelf, partly hidden by another container. Nora noticed it by accident while reaching for a dropped checklist. The box was metal, its lid worn and dusty, and on it, barely visible letters. Wilson, 1984, 1989, something clenched inside her. Wilson, her last name. Coincidence? Of course. Wilson was a common surname. There were probably dozens of such folders. But the box felt wrong, old, unregistered, like it had been hidden. Nora stared at it. She remembered Lambert's words. If it has no label, don't open it. But this one did have a label. Faded, but still there. That counted, didn't it? She looked around. There were no cameras in this room. No one was watching. Behind her, only silence and the low hum of ventilation. She slowly lifted the lid. Inside, cards. Medical. Standard format. Name, date of birth, case number, brief medical history. The first few were unremarkable. Patients named Wilson. Records from the early 1980s. Men, women, children. She flipped through them quickly and then she stopped. Name, Amy Wilson. Date of birth, August 14th, 1980. Nora felt the blood drain from her face. That was her birthday. Except 3 years earlier. She read it again. Record type, initial registration. Note, adopted daughter. Medical observation recommended. See personal file for details. Her hands trembled. She gripped the card tighter, as if afraid it would vanish. A mistake? Just a coincidence? Amy was a common name. But the same birthday? The same last name? No. This was something else. She looked deeper into the box. There were several cards marked Amy. One listed brief diagnoses, frequent colds, anxiety disorder, phobias. Another, a referral for testing. And one marked in red, case closed, personal file destroyed. Archive copy, not available. But if everything was destroyed, why was this card here? She looked up. Metal shelves, gray walls, a single lamp above. Suddenly everything felt too sharp, too foreign. As if the room had changed, just because she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. Nora put the cards back and closed the box. Her hands still shook. She stood there, trying to steady her breathing. Then quickly left, returned to her desk. Sat down, turned on the monitor, but couldn't focus. The lines on the report blurred. August 14th, her birthday. But the card said 1985. She was born in 1988, 3 years apart. But everything else matched. She thought of the birth certificate she'd examined at home. There was no mention of adoption. Officially, she was their biological child. So either the card in the archive was a mistake, or the official documents were a lie. By evening, she made up her mind. Collins, surprisingly, was in his office. She knocked and entered without waiting long. He looked up from his laptop. Miss Wilson, do you have a minute? He nodded, gestured to the chair. Something wrong? She hesitated. I came across an old file in the archive. A woman named Amy Wilson. Same birth date as mine, just 1985. The card says, adopted daughter. I don't have a sister. Never did. My parents never mentioned anything like that. Collins listened silently, didn't interrupt. I know I should have just logged it in the registry, but I couldn't. It's strange, and it feels like it's connected to me. I'm not asking you to break protocol, but you've worked here longer. Maybe you could tell me. What does it mean? He was silent for a long moment. Then he slowly closed his laptop and straightened in his chair. Are you sure it's not you? What? The file. Are you sure it's not about you? She shook her head. It says 1985. I was born in 1908. I checked. I have a birth certificate. Certificates have strange origins sometimes, he said evenly. Especially when a child's adopted. Sometimes they're reissued. Sometimes completely fabricated. It depends on the case. Are you saying that I'm not saying anything, he leaned back. But if a document exists, and it's in our archive, it existed for a reason. You're not the first to find something personal here. And trust me, you won't be the last. You knew? No, but I suspected, after the interview. She studied his face. Why? He sighed. Sometimes our system flags odd overlaps, names, dates, addresses. When you applied, I ran your data automatically. That file popped up, I saw the birthday. I chose not to go digging. It's not my story, but now you've opened it. I want to know who she is. Collins nodded. I understand, just a warning. These kinds of searches rarely end simply. Adoption cases are always gray areas. Missing documents, half-truths, and sometimes outright lies. Are you ready to dig? Nora was silent, then quietly said, I'm ready. That night she barely slept. She opened an old jewelry box where she kept her mother's things. Among them, a locket. She opened it. Inside was a faded photo of a little girl, maybe 4 years old. Curly hair, wide eyes. She had always believed it was a picture of herself. But now, for the first time, she wasn't sure. Are you sure it's you? In the morning, she arrived early. She headed to the archive room. The drawer where Amy's card had been was empty. She crouched down, checked the shelf, then the ones next to it. The box was gone. When she stood up, Lambert was at the door. Looking for something? She looked at him. There was a box with the name Wilson. Now it's gone. He shrugged. Happens. They get moved to storage if the retention period's over, or they're sent for destruction. But it was there yesterday. Then it was already flagged for transfer. Someone just got to it before you. He squinted. Or maybe you were poking around where you shouldn't have. Nora didn't respond, just turned away. That day she couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the card, the name, the missing box. Only Collins, passing by, paused at her desk. Without a word, he placed a sheet of paper in front of her. It had a number, EW558, and a note. Request in restricted archive, marked as removed, but not discarded. He gave a brief nod and walked away. Nora sat on the couch, holding the note Collins had given her, staring at it like a code. EW558. Just a number. But behind it, something personal. Too personal. The archive's access system was a bureaucratic maze with layers of clearance. This file was listed as removed, but not destroyed, which meant it existed, but was restricted. It had been moved to sublevel -2, where sensitive or problematic cases were kept. Access was limited to the director and one archivist, Lambert. Collins knew, and gave her a chance to get to the truth. Officially, a request like that had to be submitted in writing. Unofficially, she could seize the moment, and she did. The next morning, Lambert was again in the basement. He winced as he came down the stairs. His joints clearly weren't what they used to be. Nora waited until he unlocked the coded door, then spoke, Mr. Lambert, can I borrow you for a second? He gave her an annoyed look, but stopped. What? I'm looking for a file. Code EW558. It's marked as removed, but I found a reference in the registry. I was told to check if it was actually discarded. He narrowed his eyes. Told by who? Collins. He didn't say anything, just pulled out a set of keys, opened a metal cabinet slowly, and found the section. A couple minutes later, he handed her a folder. You don't take it out. You read it here. Nora nodded. Her heart was racing. The folder was thin. Inside, a few pages, an old photo, and an intake form. Name, unknown. Estimated age upon arrival, about 2 years old. Date of admission, October 1987. Found after fire at Springfield Home Orphanage, Illinois. Physical condition, stable, minor burns. Psychological condition, reactive amnesia. Assigned surname, Wilson, based on prospective adoptive family. Assigned name, Amy. Note, identity not confirmed. No data on relatives. Nora's chest tightened. Unknown. She read it again, word by word. The child had been found after a fire. No documents, no name, no parents. What if that was me? Nora set the pages aside and looked at the photograph. A little girl sitting on a hospital bed. Face slightly dirty, eyes wide and wary. Dark hair, slightly curled. There was something familiar. Not exactly her features, but something in the expression, in the posture. She couldn't breathe. That same day, she went back to Collins. He was in his office, calm as ever. She walked in holding a copy from the file. Is this me? He looked at her and then at the photo. I don't know. but it seems like you want to find out. Why are you helping me?" He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "There was a loss in my family too. A sister. She was little, taken from a hospital, never found. My parents died not knowing the truth. I know what it's like, to not know who you are." Nora nodded, feeling his confession echo in a quiet part of her. "But if I was that child," she looked at the photo again, "then who is Nora Wilson?" Collins leaned against the desk. "There are a few possibilities. First, you are that girl, the one who was adopted. The name and birth date were assigned later, officially. You were registered as a biological child to avoid the stigma of being an orphan. It happened. Not often, but it did. Second, you really did have a sister, Amy, and she disappeared. Then you appeared, with the same last name and almost the same birthday. Why?" He shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe to cover the wound. Maybe to replace one life with another." "And the third?" "The third, you're neither Amy nor her replacement. You're the third person in a story no one fully understands yet." Nora got home late, her mind buzzing, her chest hollow. She pulled out an old box of her parents' things, found a photo album, and for the first time she looked at it not as memories, but as evidence. The childhood photos started at age 4. Not one earlier, no hospital photo, no baby picture, just a garden, a cat, a trip to the lake, but all starting from the same age. She remembered once asking her mother why there were no pictures of her as a baby. "The camera broke," her mother had said, and then life got in the way. Now it sounded like a poor excuse. The next day, Collins arranged a meeting in a separate archive room, where microfilms and non-digitized medical records were stored. He was waiting with a folder. "This is a copy of the old intake registry from the clinic where you were supposedly processed. I found a match. Look." He opened to a page under the name Wilson, an entry from '97. A girl approximately 2 years old, no documentation. Name assigned Amy, parents Daniel and Margaret Wilson. Status adopted, then a crossed out line. Departure, disappearance. Date, 1989. Below it, a new line. Name Nora Wilson. Date of birth, August 14th, 1988. Parents, same. Date of entry, fall 99. Nora stared at the page, unable to process it. She began. "They just replaced one girl with another? Or made it look like they found you? But why?" Collins looked towards the window. "Maybe Amy disappeared, and your adoptive parents couldn't live with the loss. Then you came along. Someone without papers. There was a resemblance. The age, roughly the same. And they agreed. Or it wasn't chance. You were brought to them. And your documents were created to fit the old record. A new child, built from the ruins of the past." Nora felt her reality collapsing. "So, I could have been anyone?" He nodded. "Exactly. But you are Nora. And now you have a choice. Find out who you were, or stay who you've become." That evening, they sat together in the archive room. Collins said nothing. He didn't rush her, just sat there, calmly, patiently. Nora finally broke the silence. "I've always felt out of place, but I didn't know how to explain it. Like, everything was slightly off. Like I was living someone else's life. Now you know why." "Do I?" She looked at him. "Maybe I wasn't the one who replaced someone. Maybe someone replaced me. And I'm just a side effect of someone else's tragedy," he smiled slightly. "You're real, and you're searching. That means you're true." A few days later, Nora submitted a request to the Illinois police regarding the old Springfield home orphanage fire. Collins helped her file it properly. They listed the potential connection to a missing child, cross-checked dates, names, and the archived medical data. While waiting for a response, she kept working, as if nothing had changed. But now, every drawer felt personal. Every folder, a possible fragment of her past. One evening, Collins approached her. "We have a result. You need to see this." A printed report lay on the table. The fire at the orphanage. 3 children dead, 2 listed as missing, 1 later identified, the other never found. Presumably a girl, aged 2-3. The report noted inconsistencies, doubts about body identification. At the bottom, a child was found a week later without documents, possibly the same girl. There were no surviving photos, no DNA in the system. Nora read the report, her heart pounding loud enough to drown out the words. So, I was that child? Possibly, but there's no proof yet. We need testing. He pulled out another sheet. Here's the lead. They took DNA from relatives of the missing children. Their samples are still in the database. If we submit yours, we can compare. And if there's no match, he looked at her, then you're the third person in this story. Nora nodded silently. I want the truth, whatever it looks like. Collins held her gaze for a second. Then you're already stronger than most. Waiting for the DNA results was unbearable. Nora knew it could take weeks, maybe longer, and maybe it wouldn't give her clarity at all. But there was no turning back now. She had come too far. Like someone who'd found a crack in the mirror. She could no longer look at the reflection and not see it. Collins stayed out of the way, but remained nearby. He understood that from this point on, it was up to her. What she asked, where she dug, what she dared to uncover. The archive was a silent witness, a quiet library of the forgotten, the hidden, the accidentally preserved. But in places like that, the truth lives between the lines, in marginal notes, in covered labels, in tapes no one ever bothered to digitize. Nora didn't know what she was looking for, until she stumbled upon a drawer marked Rejected Materials for Audio Archive. Most of the entries had already been transferred from tapes to discs, but in the farthest compartment were items deemed insignificant or too complicated for the official database. That's where she found it. A dusty cassette. Its number, familiar. EW558. The cassette bore the name of a physician, Dr. Kelvin Meyer. He had worked at the clinic where she, or the girl she might have been, was brought after the fire. The tape was old, worn, but sealed in a plastic sleeve. Attached was a note. Internal dictation, not for distribution. Retain until liability period expires. Nora didn't wait. She pulled out an old cassette player she kept at home for lectures. Inserted the tape. Sat by the window. Outside, it was April, light filtering through heavy clouds, still cold. Inside, the air was thick, like before a storm. She'd pressed play. November 8th, 1987. Dr. Kelvin Meyer. Record for personal archive. We received a female child, approximately 2 years old. No identification documents. Child was found at the site of the Springfield Home Orphanage fire. Minor injuries, surface burns, smoke inhalation. Conscious but disoriented. Partial memory loss. At the time of arrival, the girl did not speak her name, or any name. Selective mutism. Withdrawn response to touch. Signs of acute emotional trauma. Nora froze. The doctor's voice was steady, clinical, but underneath, held back exhaustion. Social services allowed 48 hours for processing. By the decision of a temporary guardian, and with the approval of the adoption unit, the child was assigned a name, Amy Wilson. Prospective adoptive parents, Daniel and Margaret Wilson. The situation is complicated by the absence of official identification. Registration office requires clarification. However, due to urgency, it was decided to proceed. Child to be listed as adopted with no attempt to recover prior biographical data. Tape hissed, then resumed. A week after placement with the Wilsons, the child returned. Reasons undisclosed. Officially, stress, failure to adjust. In truth, disappearance. The girl was missing for 2 days. Police found no leads. Eventually recovered, no explanation. Condition deteriorated. Upon reevaluation, amnesia noted. The Wilsons declined to take her back. But 2 months later, in late January 1988, the same child reappears, under a new name. Documents processed as for a newborn. Date of birth, August 1988. Name, Nora. Surname, Wilson. Same adoptive parents. Previous record erased. Card destroyed by order of senior registrar. Silence. Tape hiss grew louder. Nora clenched her hands, but then the voice returned, quieter, rougher, like he was no longer dictating, just speaking to himself. I shouldn't be recording this, but I can't stay silent. We rewrote a history. The girl remained, but the name changed. The identity, manufactured. We don't know who she is, but we let the documents decide who she should be. We didn't search for real parents. We just wanted the paper version to be cleaner. I stayed silent. I shouldn't have. Nora turned off the tape. The room seemed to shrink. She didn't know how long she sat there. Her shoulders ached, fingers numb. A single thought pulsed in her mind. You're not her. You're not a Wilson. You're not nobody, but you're not somebody either. And for the first time, she didn't feel empty, just clear. The next day, Collins met her in the hallway. She simply handed him the cassette. It was in the lower archive, a recording by Dr. Meyer. He nodded, inserted it into a player, listened silently. Didn't interrupt, didn't ask. When the tape ended, he said, "So they rewrote your life. Officially, on paper. They pretended I was born, but I was found, and no one cared who I was before. And yet, you're here. And yet, I exist," she said, "even if I don't know from where." He looked at her with something close to respect, maybe even admiration, as if it wasn't every day that someone shattered their own history and remained standing. I want to file a new request with the police and the DNA archive. I know we already did, but now with context. I'll help. I don't want your help out of pity. It's not pity, he said. It's respect. You weren't looking for comfort. You wanted the truth, and that's rare. The police reply came a week later. DNA comparison with remains and records from the Springfield fire confirmed. She was not the missing child, not Amy Wilson, not any of the identified victims. Nora read the letter calmly. She had already sensed it. She was not Amy, not a substitute. She was the third person, a shadow in someone else's tragedy, someone who appeared at the moment the system needed a solution. Colin said nothing when she handed him the report, just looked at her and said, "Then the new question is, who are you?" Nora sat down, smiled, faintly but without bitterness. "I don't know, but I don't want to be a fabrication anymore." "Then who do you want to be?" "Someone who gets to decide for herself." He nodded. She stayed at work. The inventory was nearly complete, but she no longer viewed the boxes as faceless files. Each story now had a face, even those without one. A month later, Collins called her into his office. "A new position just opened up," Collins said. "Access coordinator for archival materials. You're the perfect candidate. You know where everything is. And more importantly, you know why it matters." She nodded. "I accept." Later that evening, they sat on the rooftop of the building. Collins had brought coffee. The warm May air stirred the city below, as if it breathed life into the concrete and glass. "You look calm," he noted. "I just stopped waiting for someone to tell me who I am. Now it's enough to be who I've become." He raised his cup. "To those who choose themselves." She raised hers. "To those who aren't afraid," and for the first time there was no pain inside her. Only stillness. Friday, end of the workday. The archive exhaled a faint weariness. Metal shelves cast long shadows. The air was thick with old paper and stale ventilation. But Nora didn't feel buried in it. She felt rooted, as if every scent was now part of her own space. Almost 2 months had passed since she learned the truth, or rather, since she understood that truth was never a ready-made answer. Only fragments from which one could build a self. Not a name, not a number, not a date of birth, but a decision of who you choose to be. She had become who she wanted to be. The staff gradually adjusted to the fact that Nora was now not just an archivist, but the official access coordinator. Her signature now appeared on requests. She managed document distribution, handled the restricted database, did what Lambert used to do, only with more precision, more kindness, more attention. Collins remained nearby, reserved, steady, always slightly at a distance. He never crossed boundaries, but never withdrew either. There was something between them that didn't need to be named. Respect, connection, a quiet spark that needed no grand gestures. On the third week of her new role, Nora received an internal request. Confirm access status for case file K34789. Initiator, Police Archive. She traced the number. It was connected to her own story. The orphanage, the fire, a case listed as lost. She went into storage, found the file. It had been misfiled under the wrong code. Inside, nothing new. Investigation reports, fire summary, list of the deceased. But one page stood out. Not printed, typed, no stamp, just... The girl wasn't searched for. It was decided not to search. Protocol signed perfunctorily. A name was assigned for convenience, not truth. The signature, illegible. Initials, MD. A chill ran down Nora's spine. She brought the document to Collins. He read it carefully, then said, "The signature belongs to Margaret Delaney. She worked in child services. Oversaw the Wilson case. Is she still alive?" "No, died in 2017, heart attack." "Any relatives?" "A son. Lives in Milwaukee. He wouldn't talk, but I know someone who might. Used to work with her. Let me make a few calls." Nora hesitated. "Do I need this?" He looked at her. Not to explain everything, just to close the loop and move forward. A week later, she was driving to Milwaukee. Spring had settled in. Trees wore fresh green. The sky was clear, the roads open. In a small house on the outskirts of town, a gray-haired man named Arthur, Margaret's former colleague, was waiting. He didn't pretend to be clueless. He simply brought out an old box. "She kept this. Don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear that someone like you would show up one day." Inside, letters, report copies, child placement records. One envelope read, "Nora?" Inside, a short letter. Shaky handwriting. "You were supposed to disappear, but you stayed. I chose not to look for your past. It might have been worse than the one we made up for you. I'm sorry, I don't know how it could have been better, but know this. You remained not by mistake. You were chosen." Nora read the letter over and over. It didn't explain, but it gave her something she hadn't had before, the right not to blame herself for who she'd become, for being created and not erased. Back in Chicago, she returned to the archive late at night. Almost no one was around. Collins was in his office. Light from the window cast a long shadow across the floor. "I found it," she said. He looked up. An answer? No, but something that let go. She placed the letter on the desk. He read it without speaking, then closed his eyes as if acknowledging that everything that could be found had been found. "Will you stay?" he asked. "At the archive?" He nodded. Nora smiled. "Yes, this is where I find order, and where I begin." A month passed, then another. Nora found her rhythm. New employees came in. She trained them, held seminars on archival methods, built a private tagging system for personal coincidences, for those who, like she once had, might find pieces of themselves buried in the stacks. She never told anyone her story. But one day, staying late with a new intern, she noticed the girl staring long at the old index cards. Nora walked over, sat down beside her, didn't ask, didn't offer help. Just quietly said, "Sometimes in these files, we don't find what we were looking for, but we find what we need. And if that happens, don't be afraid to come talk." The girl nodded, and Nora understood. She was now on the other side. May had fully bloomed. Chicago buzzed again the way only it could, with intersections, fountains, street musicians. One evening, Collins invited her for a walk. No reason, just to step outside the building, outside the system, outside the boundaries they'd been living in. They walked along the riverfront. The breeze lifted her hair. The air smelled of damp soil and freshly cut grass. "You've changed," he said. "No," she replied. "I just took off someone else's clothes." He looked at her. "Who are you now?" Nora smiled, calmly, deeply, with a warmth that hadn't been there before. "I'm not a daughter, not a victim, not a mistake. I'm Nora, the person who didn't back down, even when she didn't know what she was looking for." He nodded and said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. They stopped at the railing. The river stretched before them like a ribbon of memory. Nora looked at the water and felt not empty, but light. Sometimes, she said softly, to find out who you are, you have to stop clinging to who you were told to be. Summer. The archive hummed in quiet, cooled by old air conditioners. In Nora's office, order. On the whiteboard, new workflows. On her desk, a note from the intern. Thank you for not asking, just understanding. On the door, a nameplate. Nora Wilson, Archive Access Coordinator. Sometimes she looks at the photo of the little girl from the cassette, not because she doubts, but because she's grateful. Grateful that she was allowed to stay, not by paper, not by blood, but by will. There is no perfect order in her archive, but there is meaning, because now she knows. Truth is not about destroying the past. It's the chance to rebuild the present